Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Christy MacLear.
Hi, welcome everybody. It's not just me, I'm here with an incredible, illustrious panel, and we were laughing that we have about 30 minutes because this panel could probably take up a whole hour, or I'd love to take you to all of their different sites, Paris, Red Hook, etc., Fogo Island. But I'm going to introduce you to some of the leading thinkers in the idea of the role of artists in creating our environments. And I'll start by saying that sort of the traditional concept of an artist's impact on creating community is that the artist is the forebearer for redevelopment. And I'd like to turn that upside down. And this might seem very abstract, but in having a conversation with each of the panelists that I'm going to introduce, the idea is actually that the artists don't even need a place, that the artists bring the energy and create community through their artistic practice, which might be in a space and it might not be in a space. So I'm going to start by introducing Zita Cobb, and I've been a fan of hers for a long time. You can see on the slide that we're about to show, she's the president of the Shorefast Foundation, but she created an artistic residency up in Nova Scotia, if you can show the next slide. I'm going to introduce Margery Safir, who's the founder of the Arts Arena in Paris, and she'll be able to talk about the idea of needing a space or not needing a space and creating a community in a city that we think of as a cultural beacon. We have Elizabeth Streb, who is one of our grantees at the Rauschenberg Foundation, and she's a marvelous artist and can talk about the Renaissance of Brooklyn, where she is, and even went to London as part of our Olympics. And we have Dustin Yellin, who, if you haven't been to Pioneer Works in Red Hook, I welcome you. He's probably going to pitch you to donate some money, but a marvelous artist that actually can talk about placemaking through an artistic lens. It's almost as if that's sculpture. So I'm going to invite each of you. You can see the Fogo Island. Of course, this is Paris, Pioneer Works, and Elizabeth Streb installation in London. So I'm going to just ask one question, leading question, for you to introduce what you do, but particularly with the idea that how do you create place, community, through engagement of the people and the artists? And I'd love to start with you, Zita.
Okay, first thing I have to say, Christy, is Newfoundland.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And it rhymes with understand. But in any event, Fogo Island is an island off the northeast coast of Newfoundland. And it is very much an intact community. We don't need to reinvent it or redesign it. And so I think you have, it's remote. It's an island off an island. It's rural. And the big question for us, which is the big question for all of us, is how does the part belong to the whole? And so we look to art to be an alternative to the mechanistic sense of how we organize the world that I think has come out of the kind of instrumental economics that we all suffer from. And so we're not at that place of how do we regenerate something. We're trying to figure out how do we fit in the world, because the thing about globalized capital, nobody in that world wakes up in the morning and says, what are we going to do about Fogo Island today? Mm-hmm. And so we think that art and having artists that come and live in our community, it's what they do. It's their way of seeing and their way of knowing that adds to the community strength. But I think the other part that we're looking to help do is to give us a new way of belonging that doesn't have to go through the front door and out the back door of a Walmart.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Margery, do you want to introduce Arts Arena and what you do in Paris?
Well, the Arts Arena is a nonprofit, multidisciplinary in the arts and issues of culture and society. And in terms of your first question about creating community, we were sort of an accident of urban politics. We were initially supposed to have a building dedicated for us as part of Europe's most important cultural development, an island in the Seine that was going to be dedicated exclusively to the arts and scientific research. And a new president came into France, not the current one, his predecessor, and said, you're not going to give all this prime land to nonprofits who don't pay taxes. So we were immediately born guillotined, if I can put it that way, and all dressed up with no place to go. And so we made the decision that we were going to invest in content, not in a building. And now, 8 years later, we've put on about 150 events, major events in Paris with no single home, being kind of nomads and using the city as our building rather than one single structure.
Very interesting. Elizabeth, why don't you talk about your company and even sort of how you kept the door open and brought people in the early days?
Well, you know, I run SLAM, Streb Lab for Action Mechanics. It's in Williamsburg. I went there just before the genesis of the explosion, or AKA the zoning change. I don't consider myself responsible for settling Williamsburg, or formerly Soho. I was an accidental arrival, blessed with some luck. But I also knew I first got a patron, John and Sage Coles, because I knew that to pay the rent, I wanted to have all the rent paid for 3 years, so they agreed to give me $60,000 a year for 3 years. And then only after that did the landlord give me a 10-year lease, because they figured, how will I pay for this? So it was an exercise, really, of having conversations with not my use group and figuring out how do you talk to landlords that run the Dutch mustard factory. I handed him my press pack. He handed me his vinegar apple juice press pack. I said, wow, that's cool. But really, the garage was a mess. It was an empty garage, and I believe I do extreme action. I invent extreme action, and those are dancers on the London Eye, by the way, during the Olympics. And so this garage was necessary because I feel you have to be willing to wreck the space to ever come up with a new move. Can't be careful with the walls and the mirror. Can't look at yourself. What's that all about? And I also just publicly wanted to make it a public space, ask the difference between public and private, and to have every person walking by the door feel invited in. So I started to examine the modus operandi of how do we invite people in. And I had 16 feet. I had that long for them to wander by and wonder, one, what the heck's going on in there, and two, can I walk in? And so it was about curiosity, but it was also about getting reacclimated as an artist. I was 52 then, I'm 64 now. Get reacclimated to the issues of strangers and interruption, where we all started as young artists. And it's been completely catalytic in terms of the stuff I've made in this amazing garage. And you are all invited to come there and fly, because I also have 500 kids and a flying trapeze and some other popcorn. Okay, there you go.
Sounds good.
Things you want.
And also in Brooklyn is Dustin Yellin's Pioneer Works, which has really been created organically, but I know has sort of lived in your mind for many years. Do you want to describe what you do? And you know, we chose this image because it's less about the building and it's really more about the people and the interchange you have going on there.
Well, I think, yeah, this whole existence is about people. I think it's up to us to sort of invent the world. And as you know, we've made all this up, this building that we're in, and these strange screens and all these different ideas are all invented, as is the future, which is up to us to make free energy and fix poverty and all these strange issues that, you know. So this thing has lived in my mind like a lot of weird things. It's sort of the idea is it's sort of a cultural utopia that is open to the public. And the idea is that we have all the different disciplines percolating at the same density simultaneously. So within the structure, we have a museum that's open to the public. We have a school. So right now you can take a neuroscience class that a woman out of Princeton is teaching. You can take a drawing class that a young man out of Cooper Union is teaching, a dance class, a writing class, a game-making class. We have a residency program, so we have about 10 residencies going, interdisciplinary scientists, artists, writers, filmmakers, dancers again. We have a performance space, We have a scientific research department. A recording studio is being built as we speak in the garden. We have gardens and a farming program. So it's really kind of like everything you could think of in one place. And the idea is that all of these things are happening at the same time and open with a sort of public, porous membrane with our community, with all of New York to kind of come in and get involved.
Yeah.
And it's a little overwhelming to try to have all these things happening at one time, but I think that you have to change the way people are thinking to change the world.
How do you think that level of activity has changed Red Hook, what you're doing there?
How has it changed Red Hook? Well, Red Hook's already in this, changing moment as all of Brooklyn is, I think, right now, with people who can't afford to be in the city, and artists moving out slowly, further out, as Tom said.
Yeah.
I think, hopefully what we can do is engage with our community. So we don't want to just be a place where people come from other boroughs to see art. We want our community, the people living there, to be able to be involved in our education projects, in our farming projects, in everything we're doing.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, like you were saying, really keep your doors open and really let people know that they are all welcome to participate. So we just got a grant which would we work with Red Hook Initiative, and that would bring the kids that are actually living in Red Hook, and we want to make a newspaper with them, because we're not crazy about the newspaper in the neighborhood. So we're going to have them make a newspaper, and we'll help art direct it. And we also have a big publishing arm, because when an art show leaves, it's kind of gone forever. So we publish a journal called Intercourse. I'd love to give it to you. It's in the back. Twice a year. And we publish books. We'd like to publish a book every quarter. But so the idea is to really take what's happening there, take all that content and disseminate it.
Yeah.
Christy, can I just add on one thing about this idea of how do you get the public in? One thing I didn't say about the arts arena is, while we're in all these different places, whether a gilded palace or an old factory around Paris, every arts arena event is free and open to the public, which is almost unheard of in Paris. And it's been extraordinary, because you'll find in the audience someone who could buy the Paris Opera and somebody who could never even dream of buying an opera ticket. And for every arts arena event, we also have a reception afterwards, where all these diverse people who have come mingle together, are one-on-one with the artists, and we're talking major artists who come and donate free of charge their time to the arts arena. So the way we bring people in and create this community is by this very odd notion in Paris that it's here, it's free, you're welcome.
I think it even links to something Elizabeth was saying, which is sort of the curiosity of how nomadic it is draws people in, and it's quite intimate, I believe.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've been asked to do arts arena events in London, even in New York, in Miami, and I've sort of said, why? I mean, all these cities have tremendous culture. They don't need this little startup. And my answer was that because we don't have our dedicated space, we tend to do things in spaces that hold between 100 and 200 people. And again, we're working with very high-level artists. So it's one thing to see Robert Wilson or Misha Baryshnikov or Willem Dafoe or Rufus Wainwright or Lucinda Childs or Robert Storr in a place that seats thousands. And it's something else to see them in a space that's intimate, 100 to 200 people, and then mingle with them afterwards. And that ability also, and I think this is important to say, is due to the generosity of the artists themselves. It's not hard to find venues that want you to come and will give you their space free of charge when you're walking in and you're saying, well, I have Robert Gottlieb, or I have Willem Dafoe, I have Isabelle Huppert. And all of these artists give their time free of charge to the arts arena and allow this to happen.
Right, right, and a true exploration of your city. When I think about intimacy, now I come to this beautiful picture of your island. And one thing when we were talking that struck me as interesting is how you connect the artists. They're connected to the land, certainly, but also to the natives, and they give back and to the local economy. Can you describe that?
I think the big difference between what you're doing probably and what we're doing on Fogo Island is, on Fogo Island, there's no trouble bringing people together. We're very tangled up with each other. It's an extremely intimate community. 10 little communities on this little island that's actually 3 times the size of Manhattan. And what we thought when we started so we have a residency program. We also have an art gallery where we exhibit, and we also publish for the same reasons that Dustin said. Otherwise, it just happened and nobody remembers. We thought we'd have difficulty. Most of these artists that come are urban and really don't have a sense, have never had an experience of very powerful, physical, natural place in their lives. And so we have to prepare them for that, and not all of them survive those encounters, I have to say. You know, it's a little different from what's behind us. But then the other thing we thought was, I mean, this is a fishing community, people who make a living on the North Atlantic. They have a way of knowing that comes from first principles, but they'd never met a contemporary artist before or even know what that is. And so we thought we'd have to work really hard to cause these people to come together. And all we really had to do was invite them, give them a house in the community, and it just, the most miraculous thing for us was just how people who think from first principles, say fishermen and artists, they don't need any impedance matching so they can get along and understand each other. I think we do struggle sometimes with issues of, like when we started the program, there's always a sensitivity around, are you instrumentalizing art in order to serve this community? And I go, yes, we probably are. On the other hand, the artists who come, we need to be careful with that they don't instrumentalize the community members in too explicit a ways. But I mean, it's navigating that give and take. But again, so it's not about how do we get mixed up, it's how does this little part get connected to all these other parts, like this part here.
Yeah. And some people in the community are now making chairs and making products that have come out of the residency.
Yeah, so we also have a residency program for designers. So we have a long history, a 400-year history of making things by hand. And with these designers that have come, we've started a furniture line, which is at the inn, and is now launched as a separate line that basically builds on the skills and ways of doing things that we've had for 400 years. But again, it's about finding relevance in the world, relevance to markets, relevance in terms of our aesthetic might not exactly fit at your cottage, but with a little bit of design intervention, we can make modifications that it works for urban bums just as well as for rural bums.
Right. It's so interesting. You know, all of you are the founders of this, and you all have had this tremendous impact on your environment. Where did that even start? Like, I know this was in your brain for 20 years. What was the first step for you to buy that building and transform it into that?
I don't know. When I was younger, I had studios, and then friends who didn't have studios who would come over and say, can I paint in the corner here? Can I play guitar over there? Write a poem over there? And then I'd find that if they were doing that, I would work more.
Right.
Because well, they're getting all this done. I better, you know. And that grew over the years. And then I had a studio in Red Hook that we had one residency in and one exhibition space and a studio, and I lived there. And then this beautiful building became available across the street, and I couldn't afford it. And it was, you know, it had all the windows were bricked in, and there were pigeons, and it was disgusting. I mean, it was a terrible sort of giant pigeon's nest, but it was the most beautiful building I'd ever seen. And it was kind of ahead of me. I couldn't really afford it, and I begged everyone I knew. And somehow we got the building. I mean, I had collectors writing me $250,000 checks being like, we'll take the art in 3 years, just get the building.
Yeah.
And then we still, we couldn't inhabit it. So I thought I'd live in a trailer, or I'd live in the building, I'd have my studio in the building. It would take a decade to get where we are today in 36 months. But the art went really well, and I sort of used my art career like in like Boise and biscuits to feed this biscuit monster, and just kept feeding it in. And so we sort of jump-started this organism much faster. And then I was like, well, I can't live there because I'll never be able to keep a girlfriend. Like, that's a terrible idea. I was like, you know, and I can't have my studio there because it'd be a terrible conflict of interest, you know, because people, So I sort of cut myself out of it. And when I say we, Gabriel, young man sitting over there, and this whole sort of brain trust of people came together, and it grew very fast. The school started growing from day classes to curriculum-long class. Everything just, went faster. And then all of a sudden, we turned it into a nonprofit. And all you nice people donated. And then it just like grew and grew. And now we're in this place where it's this living organism in this sort of serious institution where we're places like this talking.
Yeah. Which in reality, I think some of the challenge will be to remain organic and to remain resilient, which sometimes place might be easier not to have that constraint. Elizabeth, you are of the same mind. I mean, now you're in the Olympics and you're opening up in a very big arena.
At the Barclay Center, if all of you are free next September. It's an experiment based on our Park Avenue show called Kiss the Air. And then if it works, and the Barclay bosses, Seth said I have to have 6,000 a show for 3 shows. And then maybe we can do arena tours. But I think that our recipe for slam, I had a very particular thing. It is extreme action. I'm a myopically focused. I believe art action with machines, just like music with instruments. I mean, what's so weird about machines? I mean, the dance world thinks I'm a little weird, I've heard. But now, yes, it's impractical. I have 30 tons of equipment in a truck on the road, and it's expensive. But the idea would be to focus on a recipe. So I decided to have Streb Extreme Action. I wanted all extreme action ingredients. Kids action, because they are wild and uncontrollable. And now we have about 500 of them. And we basically steal all their moves. I just sit there and take their moves. So there's no altruism involved whatsoever. And I decided to put in a flying trapeze with the Espana brothers because I thought, well, people can fly. And it's happening co-spatially, co-temporally as well. So people are flying and kids are running all over. People are renting it, hanging from Lyra, and Streb is slamming into things. I really decided that the myths of habits of the art world, like you need privacy, in the dance world especially, you have to, I mean, do you believe they still have hardwood floors in a dance studio? If you don't have both feet off the ground, you're not really moving because you don't have to. So for me to go into the way the studios have been for centuries just seems so silly. Don't you want to fly? And then, of course, more importantly, don't you want to crash? Most people want to crash. So we demythologized interruption, demythologized all the habits that I got by training for 30 years as a dancer. The idea that strangers shouldn't be coming in, you can't open your rehearsals. It's become the most vibrant and catalytic arena to work in. And guess what? You have a great idea. You think you have a great idea. You never really know. And you think if someone interrupts you, it'll go away. And I found that if it's really, really good, it might occur to you more than just once. And then I think the issue of public and private, like I examined back when I opened this Slam Lab, and I did very swirly with money. I mean, I think of myself a little bit as a crook, an outlaw. I steal, lie, and do all those things. But I get as much money as I have to get every day. However, the notion of figuring out how extreme action can be in the world when we talk about how can art help a city. If the artist's vocabulary is so limited, we're nervous to speak to the Wall Street women and men, and we're nervous, we don't know what to say. I feel that extreme action, I mean, I guess the ultimate public, we choose models. I think the best models, as Jane Jacobs would say, would be sidewalks. And I'm thinking sidewalks in the subway. They have what people need. They don't even think about it. And they have what people want. And they just go there to congregate because they have to get somewhere. And I feel if the theater world, if the art world figured out how to maybe be somewhere where we might invite gazers, like you're all here gazing at us now, but we might also interrupt passerbys. So if we focus on audiences as passerbys and gazers, rather than I'm going to force you to come into my show at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, and you can't eat, drink, you leave the stuff of life at the door. What if we take the stuff of life in there, and you guys are making a racket because we're not saying interesting things? Like, you misbehave. And so we're trying to inculcate the notion of misbehaving into separating and breaking up and deconstructing what the audience might be for extreme action in the future.
I love most what you said, that the sidewalks are our theater today.
Yeah.
And I'll just close by thanking all of you, but also I think for this audience in particular, some of the things that I was hearing were the artist is really less about where the real estate is evolving, but more about where the concept, the new ideas of how people interact are evolving. And I think if you can look at that first, and then how real estate and buildings are tools for that, we might be able to rethink our cities and our communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very cool.